Hey everyone, I am back with Corey. Say hi, Corey.
Hey, how's it going?
And this is a BitBeamcannon general update video, and this is the first ever video where we're trying something kind of experimental. We're recording this video once, but then in editing, it's going to sort of be branched off into two different versions. One for the private video for Patreon backers, where they get to see more of the behind-the-scenes stuff and get to see things ahead of the general public. And then the public version, which will have the same exact dialogue with different visuals when there's stuff that we're talking about that we cannot yet show the general public. So let's dive into the actual updates. So first we'll do some updates on Daemon Claw. The last thing that we've been working on is the splash screen, and we can now finally show the splash screen pretty much 99% done in its visual core. I'm running it now. So first you'll see our low-res BitBeamcannon logo screen, and then it'll fade in to the actual splash screen. There we go. So Corey just did an absolutely fantastic work on the layered environment graphics, the logo, and the menu stuff, the fonts, the pointer. And we won't go into the technical details in this video, but to remind everyone, we're working on the graphics for this game actually compliant to the technical graphical constraints of classic Amiga computers. So we had 32 total color indexes that we could use for all of the graphics, not counting this classic Amiga style interface. That doesn't count. That's not part of the simulated classic Amiga screen. But everything you see in here inside the actual represented game screen is using only 32 color indexes. And it was a really fun and fantastic project to work on the splash screen with Corey, because once we figured out together the overall layout, he started working before I did with everything else besides the character, and he was very careful to leave me as many free color indexes as possible so that I would have enough left to do the character. And he also, while he was designing those graphics, made the colors as much as possible in a way that I could also use them as well in the character. So as you can see, this is how it turned out, and it was just a lot of fun.
Yeah, definitely. Love the finished character art that you got all nice and polished. I couldn't notice hardly any issues with it at all. So
yeah,
nice.
Thanks.
It looked absolutely perfect. And I was worried about our logo doing this because it's very curvy, and I was like, man, that's not going to work great for little pixels, but with enough polish and work, I got
it turned out great
as possible. So
yeah. And the environment art is so beautifully, like, it's a really nice lush environment, but it doesn't distract at all. Like, everything is so clean, so easy to read the text, so easy to see the character, a really nice sense of depth, and you did so using an extremely low amount of color indexes, which again just made it all the more possible for me to really not spare any. There definitely is not a sense, going back to 16-bit arcade and console sensibilities, it doesn't feel like I was fighting with any color limitations. And one of the things that was really important that we communicated together when we were working on this is that we didn't want any dithering. For the most part, almost no dithering, only where it really made sense for texture, like in the dirt where one color meets the other, which you applied perfectly, just the smallest possible amount of dithering to get that texture in there without it looking like so many old games where they were clearly using dithering simply because it was their only good option, because they didn't have enough color indexes to go around. And then for people that really are into classic Amiga stuff, I'll just mention that we're using the copper or coprocessor color changing tricks to create the illusion of this semi-transparent placard or background element behind the selected menu option. So you can see that there, which just adds a whole other level of 16-bit awesomeness with semi-transparent colors, which definitely was not featured in a lot of Amiga games. Anyway, so that's how the splash screen is looking. And like I said, it's about 99% done. There's always a chance that we'll decide to do last minute edits here and there. And then one thing I really want to do later, I'll probably eventually at least add a very slight, subtle, slow animation to his hair. Like there's a little breeze occasionally blowing his hair in the wind. And maybe use modular animation for the final version of the game to actually make it look like the character is breathing. But we'll see about that. It's definitely not necessary, but that might happen. So that is the title screen of Daemon Claw. And then the other thing we've been working on, which the private patrons know already to quite an extent, is we've been really working on polishing up the level 1 boss fight. And sorry, everyone that's not a patron. We've been working hard on that, and we'd love to share it with you, but we really don't want to spoil it before it's really perfect. And we're working on what's called a vertical slice. We really want everyone's first impression of it in the general public to see it when it's just be completely surprised by it and see it in all its glory, as opposed to sort of seeing it half-baked and half-finished and crude. And then by the time you see the finished thing, it's no longer a surprise. You're already ready for it and stuff like that. So that's why we haven't been sharing that work yet to the general public. But in general, what we've been doing now, Corey has finished the vast majority of animations for the boss now. We got almost every behavior working in game. And then recently what I did was put an actual visual health bar for the boss on the bottom of the screen. And then that way I could divide up the health bar and the behavior of the boss. So now all of the different moves and sort of AI for the boss, it's now divided into 3 separate states of behavior. So the lower you knock down the health of the boss, he changes up his fighting style. So he starts very haughty and very confident in himself that he's going to just be able to decimate this mere human. And then as he starts to get his butt kicked, his moves will become more dangerous and more desperate.
Yeah, and I'm hoping before it's said and done, other than just his modes, so to speak, of play, like I also would love to work in a little expression there from his facial expressions to emphasize that a little bit where we can embellish. I like that progression, though, that he's losing it as we fight him, so to speak.
Yeah, to be revealed later, but there's, we won't go into detail, but we're planning a pretty cool desperation move that the boss might do at the end as a last-ditch effort to try to grab a victory from defeat. And the one other thing that would be good to point out right now, we're really excited to get this vertical slice done for both games. We're really working hard on it, after which point some of this stuff will be revealed in a upcoming YouTube video with a guy with a really nice channel that specializes in retro stuff and Amiga as well. So in the relative near future, we're going to be on his show revealing some of this stuff for Daemon Claw and Metro Siege. But once the full-on vertical slice is done for both of them, we're really excited to be able to show everything. But keep in mind, after we finish the vertical slices, so much momentum is being built with both games where development is really going to ramp up. It's really going to speed up because the foundations are done. In the case of Daemon Claw, we did all this work. So much of the time spent to get to this point was building the engine itself, coming up with the ideas and the plot and the visual style and gameplay, getting all these sort of kinks worked out and all those minutia figured out. And now we already have the main environment for all the other levels of Daemon Claw done, and the basic theme and basic enemies for all the other levels done. So after the vertical slice, it's mostly just the boss fights and the cinematic scenes to get to a finished game. And then whatever nice additional bells and whistles we want to add, the occasional unique sub-boss fight. So don't get me wrong, we're never rushing. Quality is always more important than release dates for us. We really care about making these games awesome, but it's really cool. It's getting really exciting that after this long time of work, both games are really taking solid shape and the development process is getting faster and smoother as we go.
Yeah, the momentum picks up once you have so much of that foundation developed. Because even something like just establishing art style goes a long way too, because then once you've made one boss, you kind of know what you're working with for the next one, so on and so forth, in terms of what you can pull off, what you can do. So yeah, it's all becoming more solid in that respect. And yeah, it definitely becomes, I don't want to use the term easier, but more
smoother or intuitive.
Smoother, more enjoyable, more, you know what I mean? You have a better handle on it, and it
becomes
the progress
intuitive.
Flies faster as a result, you know?
Yeah. Absolutely. And we'll get more into that whole idea of how and why things become faster and smoother to work on. So moving on to Metro Siege, what I can show to the public right now is here is the actual ProMotion project file that I used to design the core level 2 thugs. As you can see, I can work in layers just like you can in things like Photoshop. And it's really important for saving memory since this game is being designed to actually run on classic Amigas as well as all modern platforms. We really have to deal with an actual severe memory constraints and get the most out of things and make it seem like that memory constraint really isn't there. And the two ways to do that, one, there's the modular animation technique, which I think we've shown in past videos, where the characters are actually animated by reusing the same body parts, like the head and the torso, for instance, and as much as possible to get smooth movement and new animation frames, just reposition, and then sometimes when you need to swap out, for example, the arm, if you need the arm in a very different angle, you can't just shift it over to the left or right or up or down. You swap it out with a new arm image that can handle that new position. And by doing that, you can end up with, in Metro Siege, the characters have a move count drastically higher than even Streets of Rage 2, certainly higher than Final Fight and most other classic beat-em-up games. And if we tried to do it with full frame animations, there just would have been no way to fit them in memory. So not only does it allow us to fit a ton of moves in memory, but it also can become a faster workflow because you're not redrawing every frame of an animation. You're just nudging stuff around as much as possible and then creating a new piece of limb art whenever you really need it. But it's definitely acquired skill, right? You have to work really hard to use as few body parts as possible, but still get natural, fluid-looking movement.
Yeah, the workflow for it becomes a bit more technical up front.
Yeah.
But once you reach that point of you have so many things to work with a character, even if it seems limited, you can get a lot of movement and motion and animations out of it toward the end. So
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's an acquired skill, but luckily this is not our first rodeo, as they say. Corey and I have been pixel artists for a long time and worked on a lot of games that did use modular animation techniques. It can become very intuitive and you can end up with a nice workflow, especially depending on tools. That's one of the things slowing us down a bit on Metro Siege is we're actually using for the animation the old prototype of Spriter that I made well over a decade ago that unfortunately I no longer have the code to, so I can't fix bugs. And there are several bugs in it that slow things down, the occasional crash or stuff like that. But anyway, the good news is that someone is working with Alex to make a new replacement for that tool is being made up to much higher modern standards with real programmers, and when and if bugs are found, they can actually be fixed. And that is another reason that things are really going to snowball. That's going to save so much time and allow all three of the artists that are on this game, Corey, myself, and John from Pixel Glass, will really be able to get a lot done a lot faster and more smoothly. On top of animation, this idea of body parts and moving them around, there's also the idea of swapping out body parts with another different looking body part. So once you fully animated a character to save time and memory, you can swap out the set of heads or arms or legs or torsos and end up with a very different looking character that the programmer and game designer can then also tweak the behavior of these two different looking enemies to get drastically different enemies that look and play different in a game with a lot less work than making two actually totally different enemies. So in the example here, this is the character that I named after myself. I called him Mike because of the hair and muscles, same hair and muscles. But we have the same exact number of muscles like all humans. So as you can see, he has a bat, but there's a version of him without the bat, or you can disarm him. There should be. Maybe it's just part of a layer I called, because this was the original design. Yeah, I think it's just in back arm. But you can imagine the bat is a separate image. So you literally just turn off or hide. Oopsie. You turn off or hide. You replace it with a big black rectangle and you're all set now. You can just get rid of the bat and then he looks perfectly natural in a fighting stance there. But then also, as you may have saw while I was yapping, I changed the torso. So let's see if I could find that here. Let's see. All right. And then Okay, so now we have a shirtless or jacketless or both, I guess, version. But also, let's change the head out. Oh yeah, and then the all-important butt chain, and
Right.
a nice little extra bob or blitter object that you could stamp down there to make the character look different as well. All right, there's the other head is right here. So you can see how different this character can look. And then obviously we could have other different torsos. I have planned for some more sort of Yakuza style thugs in a future level. And we could take the same core enemy and add a big tattoo to his back. And, different heads and different legs and stuff like that. So what I've been working on most recently is finishing up all the animations and cleaning up and perfecting the different variations of this core thug that will make its premiere in level 2. And then also after that fact, I really liked how this thug came out after this initial project file to design him. You can see there's other jacket variations and insignias on his jacket. And so there's a lot of range that you can create just by adding a tiny bit of extra memory used for just different heads. You could see they all use the same arms, they all use the same legs and pelvis, and you're just changing out, giving them a weapon or not, and then adding an insignia or a different head, and you can have a whole cast of characters. And then you can also tweak their animation styles, like how long it takes for them to do an attack, how long range is the attack, do they slide forward at the same time as doing a punch, is it like a haymaker, how quickly do they walk, all those things can be tweaked on top of the graphics that can just populate your level with characters that seem totally different, but you save a lot of time, obviously, by building this interchangeable core that you can then swap out parts and edit to get to your new enemies. So I've been working on that, and then I liked how this turned out so much. And it was not as directly influenced. When I made the first level 1 thugs, I was almost entirely influenced purely by Streets of Rage 2 and Final Fight. And the thugs had a slightly older fashioned pixel art style and just aesthetic in general. And I was so happy with how this thug came out, I decided to go back and start to improve and tweak and further optimize the level 1 thugs. So I'm working on that right now. But the point is, once those are done, we'll have these fully animated, fully worked out core thugs that we can then use, and all 3 of the artists on the team can take that core spriter file of the character and do repaints and swap out body parts and tweak animations and come up with the whole cast of characters to finish populating the entire world of the Metro Siege game. So that'll save a lot of time. Obviously, bosses will always be completely unique and hand designed. No boss will be one of the thugs with a repaint, but it's a fantastic memory and time saving method. If you look at any classic game, Final Fight, Streets of Rage 2, they reuse a lot of the same enemies over and over again in different levels. So we're actually going to do that I think. Yep, go ahead.
I think based on our playthrough of Final Fight as well, they pretty much throw almost every enemy at you in the first level of Final Fight, which is interesting. But,
in my opinion, not a good choice. We discussed that in our Let's Play, or was that a Let's Play? No, that wasn't a Let's Play. We were watching a long play video, right? Of Rastan Saga 3.
Yeah, same with Rastan, yep.
They had all this great creative stuff, and then they hit you with most of it in the first level or 2 levels. Not only is it you've spoiled everything all in the first few levels, so now there's much less original stuff, but the other thing that a lot of non-artists or storytellers don't understand, you might think, oh, this is going to be so cool, we're going to just hit them with all this creative stuff. But it becomes this mismatch of themes that makes it harder and harder to appreciate a given theme. I keep using in our Let's Plays and Forensic Pixologies this idea of the sort of cacophony, or what I call static syndrome, visually, but it's conceptually as well. If you just throw a million concepts, picture you're listening to your 10 favorite songs from your 10 favorite bands all at once. You're not going to be able to appreciate any of them because it's just a cacophony of different themes, different things going on at once. So it's way better to have a major theme for every level and make sure your enemies, you're sort of dishing them out. It was ridiculous in Rastan Saga 3.
It was a thing that was so obviously, I don't want to say wrong, but so obviously things were so out of place. It was hard to be why is Fishman
Yeah, like undead,
and there's not a drop of water in sight,
right?
Like why is he here? Of course it won't get that zany with things like Metro Siege,
right?
But yeah, I know what you mean. Like you want the thugs in each area to feel like they would be there,
right?
That so on and so forth. Especially true with the bosses as well, and how and then this ties into story and all these sorts of things. So it has, and we also love the idea of. I know a lot of people back in the day, particularly with arcade games, I think they were trying, hey, let's showcase the game as quick as possible for anyone who throws in their quarters and that kind of thing. But I've always felt with console games, especially, like I love being surprised throughout as you play with new things, as you play new levels, even new little gameplay things that get added and so on and so forth. So we love that idea and definitely want to keep true to that classic sort of mentality of level design and stuff like that.
Yeah, exactly. Keeping it to themes, it just makes it so much easier for someone to appreciate the work that went into any given thing. But like, it was insane. Within the first minute or minute and a half of Rastan Saga 3, you had human enemies fighting side by side with dragon men or lizard enemies or both, and undead, and plant-like monsters and fish-like monsters. I'm probably forgetting a couple of other completely off-the-wall different. The entire cast of the, what is that called? The Monsters Compendium of Dungeons and Dragons? It's like you see them all in the first
they're
literal
all
minute.
Together, attacking the same town together, or whatever.
I don't know who their boss is, but man, did they manage to organize all these desperate...
wildly different
creatures.
Exactly. Like not just like different types of people or something. It was like, no, it was like, this is like... They're from different realms. So
you'd think there'd be some different goals or animosities or mistrust or, maybe a fish man ate that plant man's baby or something. But anyway, to get back on point with the update thing, once these thugs are done, it's going to make it very fast and easy to populate the whole rest of the world with the core thugs and make them special for each new level without the extra work of actually making them all from scratch. But we're going to add original stuff, like a sub-boss and the boss of every level will be completely original stuff. But as soon as we're done with the vertical slice, each of us artists is going to have specific goals. I'm going to just marathon through and work with Alex, the programmer, to create all of the environments, to just get the whole world there so that we can then start to populate it and perfect the level maps for the length of the level and start to populate it with the new unique thugs that we're all going to be creating. And then, while I'm doing that, Corey is going to be working. He already designed the level 1 boss, which is near completely functional now, I should add, and fully working the entire ending sequence now of level 1 and how it transitions into level 2 is now completely working. Alex has been doing an awesome amount of further optimizing both performance and memory use to make all this stuff possible on a classic Amiga. John is back at work making a new original song for level 2, which is really exciting. One of the interesting things that the patrons have already seen, and I can't go into too much detail yet, it's already publicly known, at least to some people, that level 2 is down in the subway platform. So at the end of level 1, you go down into the subway, and then level 2 is in the subway platforms. And to get the level of performance and visual quality that the whole team wanted out of Metro Siege to run on classic Amigas, you have to be really creative from a technical standpoint and work with the programmer to be able to pull off lots of layers of scrolling, even though you have all these characters on screen or all this other stuff. The classic Amigas did not have the same level of power as the arcade boards that Final Fight and things like that were made out of. And even compared to the Mega Drive, even though the Amiga in some ways had more power than the Mega Drive, one way it definitely was weaker. Its built-in layered scrolling support was drastically weaker, so you really need to use some very creative tricks to get around that. We managed to pull off full-sized subway trains whizzing by in level 2 on top of other layered scrolling in the playable area and extreme foreground and extreme background layer. Once the vertical slice is done, we'll be able to actually make a public video explaining how we make all this stuff work. So that's the tricky thing. Each level has to be really worked out with Alex, the programmer, and the artists on board have to be really technically minded to figure out how are we going to pull off this effect within the fairly severe technical constraints. And like I said, Corey is going to be working on completely designing all the new, really critical characters, the bosses and probably the sub-bosses, while John and I, and Corey when he wants to, will be doing repaints of the basic thugs. And then obviously John will continue to work on the awesome soundtrack that he's creating and sound effects for the game. That's what's going on lately in Metro Siege. And the last point that I wanted to mention in this update video is keep in mind, not only is the Metro Siege engine and Daemon Claw getting more and more solid and stable, but we love making retro games, and we've already got many other future games, even partially developed, a lot of them, or in the works or on the drawing board creatively, so to speak. And we're not just making these two games, we're building infrastructure and we're building these engines and these tools. And as these games get finished, their engines and the tools we use to make them are getting better, and more of them, and better and more powerful. And so the point is, the core code and programming of Daemon Claw we'll be able to very easily make a totally new game out of once we're done with Daemon Claw. And the same goes, like, that's definitely the plan with Metro Siege with its engine. We definitely would love to do other future games on top of the same engine, which is just, again, not only is the development speed for these games as we do them getting faster because the tools are getting better and more existent, but also once those games and engines are done and all that hard work was done and all that playtesting and bugging was done, we can then springboard off of doing the future games is going to be so much faster and easier.
Definitely.
Yep, so that was the last point of this update. So we'll keep it as short and sweet as possible and just say thank you everyone for watching. And as always, patrons, thanks so much for your support as well.
If you enjoy our content and want to keep up to date on our games, please leave a like and subscribe. Also, if you want to support our projects, consider becoming a patron. The link's in the description, and we'll see you soon.